President Obama's budget arrived on Capitol Hill with a thud, not just because it weighs a ton, but today lawmakers will begin picking apart the $4 trillion plan. In less than an hour, both the House and Senate budget committees begin hearings on the proposal. Hardly anyone expects the plan to be enacted as is. Instead, Congress will go through it piece by piece, picking out things like tax increases on the wealthy and defense spending. Starting today, the name of the game will be compromise. And let me bring in Wisconsin Republican Congressman Sean Duffy. He's a member of the House Budget Committee. Congressman, good to see you again.
You too, Jose. Thanks for having me on.
So thank you. The president calls his plan practical and nonpartisan. Is that what it is?
Well, listen, the president knows that we just won a historic majority in the House and just won the Senate. And we didn't do that by selling the American people on the fact that we're going to raise taxes and have a slow-growing economy. We're going to look at the president's budget. We're going to talk about it for a couple days. But then the House and the Senate are going to do the hard work of putting together a proposal that actually is going to work towards balancing our budget. As you know, the president's budget, though it raises trillions in new taxes, it never, ever balances. And that's a real problem for us in the House. We think that we should be on a course to actually balancing the budget and making sure we leave off the next generation with a set of opportunities that are just as great as we had.
I'm just wondering if with this large budget, are there things in there that you feel that you can work together on to maybe get something that will be beneficial and something that the country can see as a bipartisan work that comes through from you guys and the president?
Yeah, Well, first off, I mean, he's proposed all these new taxes. We have historic revenues coming into our federal coffers. We've never brought in this much money, and it's because the economy is starting to grow. And so to think that we're going to increase taxes, we believe that's going to tamp down growth and putting our middle-class families back to work. What we think we can do is actually, as more revenue comes into the federal coffers, we can slow the growth of spending. And that's one of the key templates that can bring us to a balanced budget. But with the president saying, I'm going to raise taxes, I'm going to increase spending and never balance, I think it's going to be hard for us to find a bipartisan solution. And that's why the president's proposal, Jose, is just that. It's a proposal that we talk about a couple days. We have the purse strings in the Congress, and we're going to pass a budget for the American people.
The president does talk about closing some loopholes, for example, the inheritance tax, taxing inheritance, etc., that wouldn't be considered maybe necessarily a tax, a direct tax, but that would benefit the middle class.
Listen, so what we think in tax reform is that we should actually restructure the whole code. Take out all the loopholes, the deductions, the preferences that have been put in there for generations, that have been put there by people who have powerful lobbyists in Washington, and start over, reducing rates. But taking some one-offs, I think that the president and his proposals increasing taxes are one of the reasons why so many corporations are doing these inversions, finding foreign partners to buy them so they get lower tax rates in other parts of the world. We have one of the highest tax rates in the industrialized world. Let's be competitive again. Let's actually lower our taxes and make America competitive, put our people back to work. That's the engine of opportunity. But just coming out with new tax increases over and over again and never balancing the budget is not a way for bipartisan solutions. The president knows that this is going to be a big dud over here in the Senate and the House. This was not an olive branch to work with us. He knew he was going to get pushed back.
I want to switch topics to something a lot of people are discussing. You and your wife have 7 children. Do you agree with Scott Walker, for example, that our children should be vaccinated?
Listen, for me, I want that to be my choice as a parent. And you know what? I know my kids best. I know what morals and values are right for my children, and I think we should not have an oppressive state telling us what to do. Now, the community might say, well, Mr. Duffy, if you don't want to vaccinate your kids, you can't send them to school. That may be fair, but I do think we want to make sure we continue to let parents make these decisions for their kids. And I think it's a slippery slope when we start having the state getting so involved with our children.
It may be, but here's a thought. I mean, you know, I have 2 little girls. One is in 1st grade. One's in 5th grade.
Jose, I have 5. I got you. Buy 3.
All right, I know, but you've got like 20 kids. But listen, so I'm worried that if you know, what about someone in my daughter's class that decides not to inoculate, you know, not to give a vaccine to their child, and then they get something and they pass it along to my kid. In other words, don't we as a community and as a society have the responsibility to protect our children and your children as well?
which is my point. You might say, well, your community might go, well, you know what? If you don't vaccinate your children, we can't send them to public school. That may be the community's option. But as you know, I don't know how many sicknesses I've got from my kids going to school and coming home with colds and flus. And you know what? I mean, at some point we have to say, listen, let's give control to our parents. I can choose to vaccinate my kids, but I hate to have more state control over what I do with my children. And
not everybody's a great parent.
Well,
I got to tell you, not everybody really cares as much as maybe you do.
But I'll tell you, Jose, I think a lot of parents who are smart, they're well-read, they're some of the ones who are choosing not to vaccinate. And oftentimes those who may not be as well-read, they are vaccinating. So to say you just have a bunch of crackpots who are choosing not to do this with their children, I don't think that's actually true. You have well-read parents who are making this decision. You know what, I pick and choose. I vaccinate my kids on most things, but there's some things I might go, you know what, this might not work for me and my values and my family. Let's not have the state come in and start being repressive and tell us how to raise our kids.
Wisconsin Congressman Sean Duffy, thank you for being with me. Good to see you. Appreciate your time.
Hey, thanks, Jose.
Again, those hearings beginning at 10 a.m. Eastern in about 40 minutes. We're going to